I know there's nobody here, so I'm going to start in right away because I don't want to have to upload a video to YouTube. I'd rather just use it here. I'm going to finally put this baby to rest because I'm getting sick and tired of the same old stories and people thinking that they're critical thinkers and they know what they're talking about. And they rely on our news sources, which is lying to you or isn't giving you the whole story or isn't giving you the historical facts. Now, the first thing I want to start out is the Cold War ended in 1989, okay? There is no Soviet Union. So those 45 years and older can relax. The Soviet Union does not exist. And Vladimir Putin is not interested in bringing back the Soviet Union. It's just not going to happen, okay? So relax, okay? It's good storytelling for some people, but no. To understand that the news won't cover is if you do want news, why don't you read some news that comes out of France or Germany or maybe Greece? Go to one of those mainland European countries for your news source, and you'll get it a lot more unfiltered and a lot less propaganda. Okay? And again, you can Google a lot of this stuff, and you're not going to get the proper answer because I know that that's people's. A lot of people when they say research, yeah, your research is typing something in Google and believing what you read blindly. Okay, so let's put that baby to rest. That's not real research. You want to do real research? Going to a library and picking up a book that was printed years ago that you're not going to get opinion. Going to the actual countries that you're talking about yourself. Now, just because you go to that country does not instantly make you an expert. I've been to many countries and I still don't know enough about those countries to say that I'm an expert, but there's a lot that I learned. I don't go there just to see the sights like most people. They go there to see the sights and they think that they're an expert. No, no, no. You got to dig into the culture, talk to people, go to a library there, go watch a piece of live theater, which people don't do that still exists, believe it or not. Really dig into its culture and then learn the basics. If you want to understand a country that you visit, you need to understand the politics, the art, the culture, and the music. And the way to understand that is you got to have a basic understanding of the production and distribution of the surplus. Then you'll understand the politics, the culture, the art, and the music because that reflects it. Okay, now we got that out of the way. Now let's put this baby to rest. And I'm tired of repeating myself, so I am just, whenever it comes up in future streams or whatever, I'll just say, go watch that video titled Ukraine and Russia, and you'll get an understanding. Like a lot of people do, you got to go back in the history if you want to understand Ukraine. Now, as I'm speaking to you, go to the images in Google and type in the map of Ukraine and make sure it's well detailed because you need to see the separatist areas like Donetsk, Donbass, the eastern portion of Ukraine. Now, I'm going to give you the ending, how this is going to end. And I already knew this from a long time ago when it started. They're going to end up busting up Ukraine just like they did Yugoslavia and Czechoslovakia. And to let other people know, people 45 years and younger have no knowledge. 45 years and younger, mind you, have no knowledge of the Cold War. They knew it existed, but they find it as interesting as the Peloponnesian War. 45 years and younger have no knowledge of it. They knew it existed, but they have no interest in it. Okay? And let me remind you that Russia was our ally in World War II in fighting Hitler. And this is what you're not told, that, oh, America won the war. Well, we did with our allies because we sure as hell couldn't have done it alone. And will tell you this, and you need to do your own research and not Google it. If Russia had not uh, attacked Stalingrad after they retreated and they called scorched earth, and the Germans just invaded Russia like as quickly as they did, they torched everything. So anything that they encountered coming into Russia was useless. There was no because they were coming into winter, and the winters are very bad in that portion of Russia, and they're very cold, and that's why the Germans got their butts kicked, just like Napoleon got his butt kicked. They took Stalingrad and stayed there. There was still fighting going on until two huge Russian armies did a pincer move around them and surrounded Stalingrad and cut them off. I believe it was the German Sixth Army, the Sixth Wehrmacht, and got it to where didn't have any food. They were running out of food, water, freezing to death, running out of ammo. Eventually, they surrendered. Yes. But just to let you know, if the Russians had not put that kind of pressure on the German army on the Eastern Front, our grandfathers would have got slaughtered on Normandy Beach. Because the majority of the assets, the military assets, was fighting the Russians on the Eastern Front. So let's get that out of the way. But back to the Ukraine. In World War II, Ukraine was split. And don't tell me you knew about it, because unless you really studied this, you would know it. But the common people, it's not common knowledge. Well, according with Americans, it's common knowledge in Europe, but just not here. Why? Because you're not told about it, or it's not discussed in the media. And if it's not discussed in the media, it doesn't exist to you. So you got to stop relying on the media over here. Ukraine was split in two. The western half sided with the Nazis and became the Chetniks. The eastern side sided with Russia and became the partisans, our allies. Now, over the years, that bitterness was always still there. To this day, you still had a lot of neo Nazis in Western Ukraine. Even during the Soviet Union, you had it. When Ukraine was a part of the Soviet Union, it was still going on. There was that bitterness between the western portion of Ukraine against the east. Now, when Ukraine became its own sovereign country and the Soviet Union got busted up in '89, I'll go into detail why that happened, and it had nothing to do with America. And Ronald Reagan didn't win the Cold War because it was a war that was unwinnable to begin with. Anyway, when that happened, there was always a bitterness there. And it may have cooled off but there was always still pockets. Like here in the United States, we still have the Klan and neo Nazis over here, even though we've tried to end racism over the years. It's not as big as it used to be, but there's still those numbers there. Just like here in the United States. Well, just like there. When Ukraine democratically elected their last democratically elected president, his name was Viktor Yanukovych. And in 2014, he said that he was going to keep Ukraine neutral. Now, let's go back to 89. It was agreed between Gorbachev and Reagan and Bush that NATO would not move east of a unified Germany. It's not their fault, but it was Bill Clinton that started allowing NATO to go into the Baltic states that became independent from the Soviet Union, which was against the treaty. Yes, the United States keep breaking treaties, and they break them against Russia. But and yet Russia is still demonized, which, have you ever been to Russia? Do you know any Russians? Really? My grandfather told me they're no different than we are. They just speak a different language. So this demonization is just to get you against these people for whatever reason you think. Russia is not our enemy. But yeah, there's probably a lot of bitterness because we keep breaking treaties. And NATO was obsolete after 89 when the Soviet Union dissolved, because that was the only reason they created NATO. Because they were scared shitless that Russia was going to invade all of Europe. No, they were not. But they distrusted England, France, and the United States. Why? Because we invaded their country during their revolution in 1917. Look it up. Russia has never invaded the United States. Never. But we invaded them. So who has the right to be bitter here? But see, this is not the history so you can get a full understanding of what the hell's going on. Way back to Ukraine. You had your Ukrainian army in the west and everything telling people in the eastern bloc of Ukraine, the separatist area like Donetsk, the Donbass, to stop speaking Russian. In any society, even here in the United States, it's like us going down to our American South and telling them to stop speaking like with a Southern accent. No, you tell them to go get screwed, you Southerners. Rightfully so. Well, they want the same thing too. They want them to stop speaking Russian. And your Azov regiment of the Ukrainian army is a bunch of Nazis. They even got Nazi tattoos. Some of their symbols that they use on their uniform is inspired from World War II, the Nazi army, the Panzer Division, tank division. Yes. But the Azov regiment, what they were doing is, after our CIA overthrew Viktor Yanukovych, the last democratically elected president of the Ukraine, he was democratically elected and overthrown because he gave the wrong answer by saying he wanted to keep Ukraine neutral and abide by the treaty, because Russia does not want offensive nuclear weapons right on their fucking border. Just like we didn't want them in Cuba in the 60s. Well, we need to give them the same respect, okay? Plus, it's a waste of money, and we don't need it. And we as taxpayers shouldn't have to pay for it because it's not needed. It's a waste of money. And who benefits? Raytheon and your military industrial complex. That's who benefits. That's why they keep pushing and pushing for war, regardless of its stupidity and how wrong it is. Because they need to make a profit, they need to make money. And who cares about human life and being humanistic? So they overthrew Viktor Yanukovych, and what did they do? The CIA installed a puppet named Zelensky that you know today, a comedian, for God's sake. He wasn't democratically elected, and they're due for an election. But do you think that they're going to have an election? No. Now, I'm telling you right now, I don't like Donald Trump, but I side with what he's doing here, and he is right. The Ukrainians started this shit. How did they start it? By bombing and killing innocent men, women, and children in the separatist areas, Donetsk and the Donbass. You won't hear about that. You won't see news footage of it. So in your mind, it doesn't exist because the news never covered that. And this is ever since 2014 when that happened. Putin has been doing interviews. You can look it up on YouTube, telling people in the West are not listening to me. He was trying to tell them to put a stop to it, or he will. So what the Russians did was not necessarily an invasion of Ukraine. What they did was humanistic. By like, look, stop killing these people along our border. Not only that, they speak Russian, but they're Ukrainian. We turned a deaf ear to it, and the Ukrainians were going to systematically just start killing civilians. A bunch of Nazis killing the people in the separatist areas. So he said, the West isn't going to help me, so I'm going to move in. And he did. Ba-boom. And if he wanted to invade and take over Ukraine and start the recreation of the Soviet Union, that it would have this war would have been over like more than a year ago. It would have ended. Because trust me, the Russians know how to fight wars. They kicked Napoleon's ass. They kicked Hitler's ass. They went in. They put a stop to the killing. And now they want to end it. And how are they going to end it? It's the same result before the shit got started. I was telling everybody how it was going to end. They're going to bust Ukraine up like they did Yugoslavia and Czechoslovakia. The eastern separatist areas is either going to go two ways. Either they're going to rejoin Russia, or they're going to be their own country, independent from Ukraine, with the protection of Russia. Okay? Russia is not interested in conquering and you to be afraid of, okay? Because if those were the evil people that they tried to get you to believe and accept without question, they would have tried to conquer a long time ago, and we would have been in perpetual war with Russia for years and years. But they're not interested. You're fed a bullshit story, and you believed it. You believed just like the Nazis and believed Germany. Oh, our government and leadership won't lie to us. How many times does our government have to lie to us before you start to say, we're being lied to? You think they're ever going to stop? No. But I side with Donald Trump on this because he's right. They wouldn't stop killing innocent women and children while they're at school, which you weren't told about and is not fake news. Putin said enough, and Putin is not a dictator. Make friends with some real Russians, and they'll tell you that. You people are ridiculous. And my grandfather that met up with those Russians in Berlin when the European theater of World War II ended, he made friends with all those Russians. They broke up with bottles of vodka and shared them. Only few could speak English. They weren't really an educated society then, but he made friends with those Russians. And he told me when I was a little boy, because he knew what was going on. He wasn't able to contact his friends anymore, and he wanted to see them again. Never got to. And he told me, don't believe all this crap you're hearing about the Soviet Union. And I never did. My question is why? They were our ally in World War II. Why did we despise them so much? Why? Because you were told to. You were told to, and you were fed a line so they could, what's that word I'm looking for? They manufactured your consent to vote against your own interest. And who did that? Your corporations and rich who fully understood what the revolution in Russia was about. They don't want the workers and farmers of the world to unite. Because if we did, then the rich elite are nothing anymore. And they have no power or nor control. How would we do that? We would deprive them of it because they don't do none of the work. They don't do any of the work. They live off of a surplus that farmers and workers create for them. They're like your modern day kings and lords of the time of feudalism. But I'm telling you that regardless of all the death and destruction that happened there, that was unnecessary. That the end result is going to be they're going to bust it up just like they did Yugoslavia and Czechoslovakia. And what's going to be left of Ukraine itself, in the western part of the country, still will not be able to join NATO. Russia is not interested, and neither is Putin, in reforming the Soviet Union. So you can relax and trust me, Russia is far more humanistic than we'll ever be. How do I know that? Well, we don't have 800 military bases worldwide. How many bases do they got that is not in their country? None. So who's the aggressor here? Look what we did. And then let's start with the 1970s. We invaded Vietnam, which was a bullshit war to begin with. We invaded Afghanistan. We invaded Iraq. We invaded Libya. And what did we do? We lost all of them. The only reason why we went into Afghanistan was to get Osama bin Laden. But we had him, but they let him go. Why? Because if we were to capture him, the support for the war to continue in Afghanistan would have went to shit. Because that was the only purpose to go into Afghanistan. But no, we got to continue to bomb the shit out of these people. and bring them a democracy we don't even have. And now the Taliban have more territory or more control of Afghanistan than before we went in and started that war. So whenever the United States government, our government, decides something and acts, the results are pitiful, and they know that it wasn't going to work, but they're going to run with it anyway. And these tariffs don't work. I challenge you. Go to any time in the history of humanity and point to where tariffs actually worked. Never. Why? Because I already looked. Russia's not our enemy, and neither is China. That's why I'm getting disgusted with our media by saying that they're an adversarial. They changed the language now. They're adversarial countries now. They're not adversarial, not at all. Russia, their economy, their GDP is 1.5 trillion. The United States, we're 28 trillion. There's no contest there. There's nothing to worry about with Russia. China, there is, because they're catching up to us. And when they pass us, they're going to blow right by us like a car doing 40 miles an hour, and we're standing still. And don't blame the Chinese. No, you blame the corporations and our government that allowed that to happen. Because they didn't do absolutely nothing when it all got started back 40 years ago. And are the Chinese interested in conquering? No. Taiwan, maybe, but they're not conquering that country because Taiwan is part of China. Always has been, always will. And for the sake of argument, has anybody been to Taiwan? I have, many a time. Been to a baseball game there. And what language do they speak there? Cantonese and Mandarin. Oh my God, those are the same languages they speak in China. Fucking duh. Go back and read about the Chinese Revolution in 1948. Mao, which is always demonized by, oh, he killed a lot. He was the revolution that ousted the emperor who was sent into exile on Taiwan. And when I bought things in Taiwan with American currency, they asked me, how would you like your change? Would you like it in the Yuan or would you like it in USD? I said, I'll take the Yuan. I took that change as souvenir. But mind you, the Yuan, that's what the Chinese currency. I find their currency kind of interesting. But I hope you come back and people would come back to watch this video and really listen to what I said. So it puts this to rest. And I don't have to keep repeating myself. I could just tell people, go back on my page, go to this video, watch it. It's not long. I'm 29 minutes and 31 seconds in. And I covered the whole thing. It's pretty simple. But I hate Donald Trump. But when he does do something right, I will give him props for it and point it out. He's the only president that tried to talk to North Korea, and nobody wanted to give him props for that. I said, all you people know about North Korea is what you hear on the news. And they say, well, Kim Jong Un is a dictator. Well, let me tell you about dictators. They tend to be kind of evil, right? Just like Adolf Hitler. But let me point to those dictators. Did you ever see those dictators like Adolf Hitler and Napoleon and a bunch of other dictators? Did you ever see them smile all the time? And when they were meeting with certain people, that he would give them a hug or anything like that? When I see Kim Jong Un, that kid is always smiling, and I've seen him hug people and his generals and some other people. I know some of you may find that strange, but dictators don't do that. So that made you make you ought to think maybe there's something different about him that we're not being told. Exactly. You weren't told that he went to college in Switzerland and he knows how to speak English and he made friends in Europe. Korea was another war we shouldn't even gotten involved in. But like I said, it was all about money. Not for you or I, but for the military industrial complex. Those companies like Raytheon, Lockheed Martin, Boeing, they don't care who's fighting or who's fighting what war. They're like, give me the contracts, give us the money, and we'll produce. That's all they're interested in. They don't care who dies and who wins or who loses. I mean, there's critical thinking and then there's real critical thinking people. Because people have amnesia about history, but not complete amnesia. No, it's just the younger generations are not being taught, okay, this is what happened in history. What else happened that we're not being told? Because there's so much that would explain a lot for you to get a full understanding of why things happened the way they did. Because what happened to Germany in the 20s and 1930s is the same thing, almost the same thing that we in the United States have been slowly going through, but has been accelerated since 2000. It got faster. And every year that goes by, every presidential election, it gets faster and faster. And who pays for it? We do. Does the corporations and the rich? No. We're standing there holding an empty bag and 36 trillion in debt while they ran off with all the wealth and got all that money. But yet they're going to expect us to pay for it. And I'm like, no, that's not going to happen. Because that's what Yanis Varoufakis and Syriza did when they got voted in Greece. I'm not sure how that worked. I haven't read the whole story on how that ended up working out and if it did. But folks, if you want real news and non what you would call fake news, if you want real news, unfeathered and unedited, go to a European source and not the BBC in England because that's just as bad as here. Stay away from England, but pick another European country and go with their news sources. Because that's what our government has been trying to do. That's why a lot of Google and all that and YouTube is all privately owned because they're going to try to make sure that you don't know about it if it affects them. But I'm at 35 minutes. I just did this video so people can get a full understanding. And if you have any questions, don't be afraid to ask me, and we'll debate it. And I'll show you where the receipts are. Because if you read upon this stuff, you'd be like, well, there it is. Yeah. If they had not, our CIA had not overthrown Viktor Yanukovych, then Russia invading Ukraine would have never happened. And those innocent people in the separatist areas would not have been slaughtered. Anyway, you guys have a good night, good morning, and I'll talk to you later.